introduction, and also I thank the organizers for inviting me and providing this opportunity to speak to so many of the people who seem to be really interested in radiation biology and the biological basis of radiotherapy. So first of all, we should know what is the role of radiobiology. I am doing in an elementary level so that people can the micro. Okay. And can you hear me? Okay. See, understanding the mechanism underlying the response of tumors and the normal tissues, and the factors modifying the response, and development of new approaches, and also if we want to improve radiation. Can you hear? Huh?
Hello.
Okay. So finally, this understanding of radiation biology, in summary, we can improve the ultimate radiation therapy. It can help in many ways in designing appropriate treatment. So first of all, most of the time the radiobiological work is carried out in the cellular cell systems, model cellular systems. But we have to appreciate one thing, that there is a lot of difference between the cell systems and the actual tumors. Unless you understand this thing, we cannot directly take the results from the cellular radiobiology into the response of the tumors. So that's why I have shown this projection, where in a tumor it has got a various physiological compartments are there actually. There are cells which are non-proliferating G0 cells, which are resting cells, and there are sterile cells which do not divide but still alive, and there are proliferating cells which are the main target for the treatment. This is the proliferating cells that we have to actually destroy and annihilate, and also there are also so many dead cells in the tumor. There is a necrotic centers in the tumor where most of the cells are dead for want of nutrition, oxygen, and various other reasons. So it's a physiologically very complex, and there are also hypoxic cells in addition to that, a fraction of hypoxic cells. So when a tumor is exposed, the various different type of cells respond in different manner. But our primary objective will be to actually destroy those cells which are proliferating, and also the resting cells which are reversible. They can always migrate and come into the proliferating compartment, and that is how the tumor, during the tumor cell repopulation, a lot of cells migrate into the proliferating compartment, and they can come anytime. Otherwise, they will be dormant. Many cells are dormant, but they can start proliferating as soon as when the radiation therapy starts. After a few fractions, then the proliferation can begin. And anyway, here I have just shown the differences in the normal tissue response. It's only just a typical one, that the different normal tissues in the body, these are the cell survival curves for the a few of the cell lines. Just to show that the normal tissues can differ very much in their sensitivity, and so is the case even with the tumor cells. They don't have the same type of we always use a generic response, but the cell sensitivity can vary enormously, because some of them are very sensitive, like the bone marrow cells, and some of them are little more resistant. And now the important thing, see, in radiation therapy, it is very important to understand the tumor cell biokinetic parameters it is very important to understand. Because in the tumor, what is the cell cycle time of the proliferating cells? And what is the growth fraction? That is, what fraction of the cells are actually growing? And normally the growth fractions are very small. Only a small fraction of the cells, maybe 10%, 5%, 3% also, cells may be proliferating. Very rarely, in the metastasis, etc., a larger fraction of the cells may be proliferating. So this varies a lot, and what is the potentially doubling time of the tumors? Potentially doubling time of the tumors, we say, because the tumor cells can, theoretically, it can double depending upon the fraction of the cells that are proliferating. How many cells are proliferating and what is their cell cycle time? Depending upon that, the tumor cells can actually, it can double. But in practice, it is not the same as the volume doubling time, because in many of the tumors, most of the cells which are developed after the proliferation, they die themselves. They undergo actually death. It is called the cell loss. Actually 80% to 90% of the cells which proliferate, actually they die. And this is called the cell loss. And potentially doubling time is calculated without taking into account the cell loss. But actually, if you see the potentially doubling time, it can normally, a generic value is 5 days. But it can be 2 days, it can be 15 days, it can be 20 days, 25 days. That is the potential doubling time. But the actual tumors double. Maybe in the human tumors, at least in transplanted tumor, it is faster. But in the human tumors, the doubling can take place in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. This is the volume doubling, actual volume doubling time in the tumors. That is because only a small fraction of the cells, they are in the proliferation compartment. And growth, that means the growth fraction is very small, and the cell cycle time can be generally 2-3 days time will be required in the actual tumor cells too. And 70 to 80% of the cells are lost due to the cell loss. So it is very important to understand. It varies from tumor to tumor, and it is important to have a clear understanding of that. And then the repair half time. Repair, what is the kinetics with which the tumor cells repair the damage? This becomes important, particularly when we use brachytherapy. See, in brachytherapy, different dose rates can be used. The response will be completely different, and that is because, okay. So it is important, particularly in brachytherapy, it is important to understand know the repair half time of the tumors. It can be very different for the tumors and different for the different normal tissues. Some of them can have much longer repair half time, even 2 hours, 3 hours, and many times the repair can take place within half an hour. Okay, this is a historical slide showing the cell cycle time. This was the historical method by which we used to measure the cell cycle time by using appreciated time median labeling. But today this technique is not used, as you say. Nowadays there are very good techniques using flow cytometry and labeling the cells with IUDR or VUDR, and then using the antibodies against the proliferating cells. It is possible from tumor biopsy to find out the cell cycle time as well as the potentially doubling time can be detected. Modern techniques have advanced a lot since our time. This was about 30 years ago. This is the technique we were using. And then this is the basic philosophy in the basic principle of radiation therapy. The purpose is to kill the cells, to put it in a very simple way, because it can kill the cells. And then the next thing is to use as much dose as possible, so that the higher the dose you use, you can see that higher the dose you use, the better the chance, the more damage you cause to the tumor, higher the dose. But there is only one problem. The normal tissue also undergoes damage. This is the normal tissue curve. It also undergoes damage. So what we should achieve is that we should give the maximum possible dose that can be tolerated by that produces acceptable level of morbidity in the normal tissues. That should be the thing. Higher the dose you give, the better will be the chance to annihilate or cure the tumor. But you can only give that much dose which can be tolerated by the normal tissues, which can result in acceptable levels of morbidity in the normal tissue. This is in the simplest way this graph explains this. Now if you see this graph, you can see that probably if you give this much dose, probably the normal tissue toxicity may be acceptable, and then it can result in a reasonably good level of a tumor cure. So a compromise has to be made normally, because we can't give too much of dose. Normal tissue morbidity should not be, itself will be a cause for the failure of treatment. So now these are the radiobiological efforts to modify. This is the purely radiobiological, not the physical method. Radiobiologically, use of sensitizers. If tumor can be sensitized, it can shift the curve towards the left, the tumor response curve. And if you can use chemical radioprotectors, it can shift towards the right. So you can separate these two, the two normal tissue and the tumor and the normal tissue can be, if you can separate, you will be able to achieve a better rate of cure. But anyway, much of this has remained somewhat a dream and not completely realized, but still efforts are on to use as many new sensitizers are being investigated, and trials are going on. And unfortunately, as far as the radiation protection, normal tissue protection is concerned, it is only amifostine that I know has been tried and can provide some level of protection to the bone marrow, to the liver, and to some of the tissues, but does not provide protection to the lung and the central nervous system. So mostly many of the protectors that have been tried, they are highly toxic. That's why it's not possible to do. And it is the same is the case with many of the sensitizers also. They are also somewhat toxic. You have to manipulate the pharmacokinetics in such a manner that you can reduce their toxicity, and many efforts have been done in this direction. So here is this is a historical one which showing this is the transplanted tumor, and you can see after you transplant the tumor, it keeps on growing, and ultimately when it reaches a particular size, if no treatment is done, the animal dies. Animal dies by this time the tumor grows to a particular. But in case if you are exposed to radiation at this point, you can see that at once the cells are inactivated, and the cells again start growing. If there are still some tumor cells which are left, if they are left, they will keep growing, and once again tumors will reappear. When they come to a size of about 5 millimeters, you can detect whether the tumor. And this delay normally is called as a tumor growth delay. So a dose that is not adequate to kill all the tumor cells can only prolong the life of the animal by a few days or a few months. By introducing the growth delay. And if you want to really cure, the philosophy of tumor cure requires, theoretically, it requires that all the cells will have to be destroyed. All the proliferating cells, all clonogenic cells have to be destroyed. This is of historical slide, the experiments of Professor G.W. Berenson. In fact, he was the first person who taught me clinical radiobiology. He was my teacher. And rhabdomyosarcoma cell transplanted tumors, they were exposed here to various doses of 3 gray fractions, 5 the untreated, and 5 fractions, 10 fractions, 15 fractions, like that, and ultimately he had to give 30 fractions. When 30 fractions were delivered, then the tumor didn't reappear. All the other lesser dose, this is only in the animal model system, in the rats, transplanted rhabdomyosarcoma. But anyway, it's a very elegant experiment that shows that it is necessary to annihilate the last living tumor cells if you want to achieve tumor cure. If you give less dose than that, it is under treatment and the tumor recurrence takes place. So this experiment has the historical importance of demonstrating the importance of delivering the adequate dose. Then only it is a tumor cure. Otherwise, it will just be a prolongation or the regression of the tumor and then the recurrence of the tumor. Okay, here is the principle of the dose fractionation, as to how the dose fractionation works. So here, I have shown here the dark one, it is the tumor, and the red colored one is the normal tissue. There is a small difference, even though the sensitivities are not very different, but there is a difference in the initial response. A difference here, see, at this dose of about 2 gray, you see a lot of difference between the normal tissue and the tumor, and it is this difference that we exploit during the dose fractionation. The fractionated radiotherapy exploit. If this difference is there, fractionated therapy can succeed, because when you give a large number of fractions, ultimately the difference between the survival response of the normal tissue and the tumor tissue will become, they bifurcate completely. Then it is possible that we can achieve good level of cure. But if this is not true, if the tumor cells are more resistant than the normal cells, then it is not possible to do a successful radiation treatment for that tumor. But in general, many normal tissues have this response, and many tumors have this response, but there are always exceptions to this rule. If you see theoretically, when you do fractionated radiotherapy, a generic value for the D0 value for the tumor cells, it is 3 gray for fractionated radiotherapy. And if you try to plot the cell survival against the dose, when you reach about, say, about 60-65 gray, you get a survival, one tumor cell will be surviving. Normally a generic value for in a tumor may contain about 10⁹ cells. And as you give the fractionated radiotherapy, you see here the partial remission already takes place within the 3, 4, 5 fractions. Partial remission takes place. Almost complete remission can take place by about 20 gray. But it is far from treatment, far from the completion. Tumor may disappear. But if you want to achieve cure, you should go to at least to this much level. And if you want really good cure, you should go to this level. Sometimes it is possible to give that much dose. Sometimes it is not possible to give that much dose because of the normal tissue, problems of normal tissue toxicity. And here is a curve, probably physicists will know better. It is the relation between the tumor cure probability and the number of viable cells. Actually, theoretically, even if you have 1 or 2 viable cells left, proliferating cells left, clonogenic cells left, then the tumor cure probability becomes very low. But when you come to about, say, 0.1, it will reach almost 90% tumor cure probability will be reaching. So physicists can easily appreciate the importance of killing the last living clonogenic cell. When you say 0.1 cells are surviving, practically 90% probability that all the tumor cells have been inactivated. And in fractionated radiotherapy, there are 5 R's I am showing here. Normally people do not show this radiosensitivity, but it is of very great importance. The initial radiosensitivity refers to the response of the cells exposed to 2 gray radiation dose. Because when we give a standard fractionation scheme, what is the percentage cells which survive the 2 gray dose? That is the most critical. And the ultimate response of the tumor will depend upon that. And after that, the other 4 R's, repair of sublethal damage. When the cells when there is a gap between the 2 fractions, normally 1 day gap is delivered in a conventional therapy, 1 day gap is given. The normal tissues can recover from the sublethal damage, and normally they are capable of better repair than the tumor. Normal tissues can repair sublethal damage better than the tumor cells. This is one principle. And the second one is the reoxygenation. Normally, as you know, the tumor cells have got, I told you, when the tumor cells are away from the blood vessels, capillaries, they become hypoxic. They are deprived of oxygen. And the hypoxic cells are very resistant to radiation. They are quite radio resistant. So, or if you try to give one large dose, you will be able to kill only the eoxic cells. And the hypoxic cells remain, they are unaffected by small doses. Hypoxic cells are normally 3 times more resistant as compared to the eoxic cells, oxygenated cells. So when you give a time gap between the fractions, the reoxygenation of the tumor cells, those cells which are hypoxic during the first fraction, will become oxygenated again during this gap. So this is what we call as reoxygenation. This will solve one of the problem of hypoxic cells. There may be many tumors which may have 10 to 20% cells which are hypoxic centers will be there. So this problem also is solved by fractionation and redistribution of the cells. Cells can be distributed in cell sensitivity varies enormously depending upon the phase of the cell cycle. Late S phase cells, for example, are very, very resistant. Similarly, quiescent cells are much more resistant than the proliferating cells. So there are cells in the resistant regions and cells in the sensitive regions. Your aim should be, when you give a fraction, you kill whatever cells are in the sensitive phase and wait for the cells which are in the resistant phases to migrate towards the sensitive region, and when you give the next fraction, you can target them. So in this way also the fractionation is a very good, very radiobiologically very sound. And then repopulation. This is one of the important problems. See, in the normal tissues, repopulation doesn't normally take place during the treatment. It happens only after the treatment is complete. But when you come to the tumors, normally we assume that the repopulation definitely begins after about 10 to 12 days. After 5 to 6 fractions are over, repopulation is sure to begin in the tumors. The quiescent cells, they migrate into the proliferating compartment and start proliferating even more rapidly with a shorter generation time. So this is a big, as far as the tumor repopulation is a problem in those tumors where the potential doubling times are short and where the repopulation rates are high. Repopulation is high. That actually it challenges the treatment. Repopulation challenges the fractional treatment. It challenges that thing. If there is a very high proliferation, repopulation rate, those tumors are difficult to cure in the conventional time frame. That is normally 40 days, 39 days. That's what we use for the entire course of 30 fractions. But where the repopulation rate is high, you may have to reduce the overall duration of the treatment such that you can challenge the repopulation. You should reduce the total overall treatment time so that the repopulation doesn't just reverse the effects of irradiation. See, I have told you that the tumor cells also, they generic values normally they are similar in the response, but there are tumor cells which can, this is the classification of the tumor cells depending upon the sensitivity. See, these are very, very sensitive type of cells. A 2 gray fraction kills about almost 0.2%. The survival will be 0.2%. 80% cells are killed here by 2 gray. Whereas there are resistant tumors in which only about 0.5% of the cells are killed. And depending on, here there are in between. So it is a increasing radiation resistance. These are the most sensitive groups. So whatever values I was able to get, I have just seen only to tell you that some of the tumor cells can be quite sensitive and they respond also fast, and some of the tumor cells like the melanomas, sarcomas, etc., glioblastomas, they can be quite resistant to radiation. So they may limit the success of radiation therapy. This is a thing we should remember. And in spite of all the advances, there are so many tumors which are quite resistant to treatment, particularly to radio resistant for treatment. What are the actual reasons which make the tumors resistant? What are the causes of, we call it as the clinical radio resistance, the intrinsic radio resistance. I have already shown you the last slide how the sensitivity of the tumors can vary. If they are quite resistant type of cells, like particularly the melanomas and the sarcomas, they are quite resistant. It's difficult to treat this with radiotherapy. And proliferation kinetics. Proliferation kinetics means one of the important thing is the tumor cell repopulation rate. If the tumor cell repopulate very fast, they always, I have told you that they challenge the treatment. And the tumor size is also an important factor. Larger the tumor, the more difficult it is to treat, because larger tumor actually requires higher dose. But because of the normal tissue volume involved will be larger, you have to actually you can give only less dose than that of for a small tumor you can give a large dose, but for a large tumor you have to give smaller dose in order to, because of the normal tissue involvement of the normal tissue toxicity. So tumor, this is why we detect, if we detect in the early stages, we have a very good success rate, but when it is very large, the success rate becomes very low. That is the importance of early detection and ability to recover from potential lethal damage. Normally we speak only about sublethal damage. There is also what is known as a potentially lethal damage recovery, ability to recover from potential lethal damage, in which the cells, under some conditions, which would be, otherwise the cells will be lethal, but under some suitable conditions, even such a damage which would otherwise be lethal, the cells can survive that, can repair that thing. And this ability has been studied extensively even in the cultures, particularly the melanoma cells. They can repair a large quantity of the large amount of the potential lethal damage, and they can. That's why they are very, very radio resistant. Difficult to treat the melanomas. And acquired radiation resistance is the hypoxic cell problem, and metastasis. And people know metastasis. Once the tumor has spread and metastasized into the different regions, then it is very difficult. You can only achieve a local control, and you have to treat the metastasis with other techniques by systemic treatment like the chemotherapy and other treatments will be necessary. If the tumor has not in the earlier stages, whenever they are detected, there is less chance of a metastasis being formed, metastasis being there. So the success will be always local control can completely cure in the early stages. And there are many technical factors, and the physicists know about it very well, so I will not elaborate. The precision of the dose delivery, tumor localization, all these are the pure physics things, and I think the physicists know this very well. How the even if there is a small part of the tumor that is left untreated, then it can become a cause of the failure of treatment. Dosimetry, tumor localization, dose delivery, and so many other technical factors are also very, very important. And how to overcome the radio resistance? There are so many, radiobiologically there are many approaches. See, everybody knows about Adams laboratory, which were the pioneers in the hypoxic cell radiosensitizers. If hypoxia is a problem, Adams laboratory has done decades of work in making new and new chemical radiosensitizers, hypoxic cell sensitizers, and many of them were found to be toxic, but some of them are still under trial. I'll show some of the examples which have worked. And use of high energy beams like proton beam and particle beams, etc., in order to improve the localization of the geometric advantage, to get a very good geometric advantage, that is to treat exactly the normal, minimize the normal tissue exposure and give high dose to the tumor itself. That is one of the efforts, because you can definitely deliver a good amount of the dose to the tumors and reduce the exposure of the normal tissues by improving the dose distribution. We call it as the dose distribution advantage. And then combination of hyperthermia and radiation. It has, a decade ago, actually there was a lot of excitement because hyperthermia has got a very good rationale. Radiobiological, it has a very sound rationale, but it has not been completely, potential has not been realized, unfortunately. No. I'll tell you some of the rationale at a later stage. And dose enhancement by improving the dose distribution and reducing the normal tissue volume. Nowadays there are so many physical techniques. Actually physics has come to the help. The IMRT and so many other conformal type of treatments are available which can enhance boost the normal tissue dose and boost the tumor dose and reduce the normal tissue dose. And use of chemical inhibitors of PLDR. There are a number of them available now. And development of new treatment techniques. Okay. We will go to the next one. Oh, it's a picture of the hypoxia. Actually, you can see the hypoxic cells. I would only like to summarize this thing briefly. See, whenever the cells are about 150 micrometers away from the capillary, those cells are acutely hypoxic. When they are beyond that, they actually die due to such an acute hypoxia and they die. So about 5 millimeters of Hg, partial pressure of oxygen, which is present. This is actually a cross section of a capillary, and the oxygen diffuses. It can only diffuse this much, and after that these are acutely hypoxic cells, and these are actually necrotic cells. The cells start dying when they are away from the more than 150 micrometers normally. Here it is shown 70 micrometers, but many people say up to 100 micrometers, 150 micrometers. Up to that, sometimes migration can take place. And methods to overcome the problem of hypoxia, you can see a lot of, so many different techniques have been, fractionation is normal, hyperbaric oxygen, hypoxic cells, and I already explained these things. And hyperbaric oxygen was tried and found to be successful in some of the tumors actually, but the practical difficulties in using the hyperbaric oxygen technique has discouraged people from, it has made them to discontinue this technique, but radiobiologically it's very sound and it has worked in the clinical trials. And improving the oxygenation of the tumor by blood transfusion, perfluorocarbons, nicotinamide, and mixture of carbogen and nicotinamide, angiotensin and flunarizine, various things have been tried, and probably they do improve the oxygen status of the patient. Particularly I have seen the clinical results of the patients in whom they have done the blood transfusion. After the blood transfusion, the hemoglobin levels are good. They respond better than those with the poorer hemoglobin level. That is a proof of the problem of hypoxic cells actually. And increasing hypoxia, okay, why are we going back? Okay, is it a time? Yes. Oh, okay, 5 minutes more. And these are the various hypoxic cell sensitizers. Most of them are nitroimidazole derivatives. And this is the structure and details, okay. And this is the rationale for thermoradiotherapy. Only I want to say that the hyperthermia can kill the cells which are in the resistant phase of the cell cycle much better, and also the hypoxic cells much better, because hypoxic cells will be at a lower pH value. They are slightly acidic due to the anaerobic glycolysis and because of the accumulation of lactic acid. So this is the rationale for combining the inhibitors of potential lethal damage. I have already told you that PLD can be repaired wherever the tumors where the PLD takes place very actively. It is possible to use chemical inhibitors, and these are the ones I saw. Many of the inhibitors, even physical inhibitor, hyperthermia is one of them, and many base analogs and ARA-A, ARA-C, and so many new things have been also invented, now being used and tried, and probably to some extent it may work. And as far as brachytherapy is concerned, there are various types of, practically formerly the most of the treatments were continuous low dose rate brachytherapy. Normally lower doses were, nowadays higher doses are used up to about 0.8 gray per hour probably up to that dose rate is used, 0.5 to 0.8 gray per hour dose is used. But mostly this due to the problems of radiation protection. Nowadays, that the idea is to use fraction at a high dose rate, and up to about 6 to 7 gray radiation doses per fraction, 7-8 gray radiation dose per fraction, 2 or 3 fractions are used, and probably it will replace the low dose rate brachytherapy in most of the cases at least. Probably. That's the only thing. Pulsed brachytherapy also, some trials have been done, but not much of the results have not appeared. But it has a very good sound radiobiological rationale, because the pulsed radio brachytherapy can use both the advantages of HDR as well as LDR. Okay, this I'll explain this one later on. And there are so many new modalities of cancer treatment. Whenever the treatment doesn't work, naturally new modalities are developed. And I would only like to name a few of them. That is the accelerated light ion radiotherapy and radioimmunotherapy, using the radio-labeled immunotherapy using antibodies against the tumor, antibodies labeled with the radioisotopes, and neutron therapy and photodynamic therapy and thermoradiotherapy I already explained, and also the boron capture therapy used for the treatment of the CNS tumors. And many boron compounds have been, Japanese have made so many boron compounds which specifically are taken up by the brain. So they can treat very radio-resistant tumors, can be treated with boron capture therapy. It gives a very high LET radiation, alpha and recoil lithium. And areas of future research, to undertake clinical trials to validate the radiobiological concepts. This is very important. Unless the radiobiological concepts are subjected to clinical trials, it cannot be, it has no value actually. So this is most important area. And also the refinement of the time dose fractionation models based on the feedback from clinical trials. What you require is a feedback from the clinical trials. Then only it becomes sound. Otherwise it will remain as a theory, more or less. And non-invasive techniques to assess hypoxia, and development of non-toxic chemical modifiers. Because most of the, particularly both the hypoxic sensitizers as well as the chemical radioprotectors, both are highly toxic. We are unable to, whatever is very effective, that is highly toxic. So this is a dilemma. So maybe in the future there may be better compounds. Evolution of tumor kinetic parameters, and tumor kinetic parameters are extremely important, and they have to be understood very clearly if we have to be effective in applying the new treatment protocols. And radioimmunotherapy, and to develop tumor-specific antibodies, evolve methods to reduce the normal tissue toxicity, and study the efficacy of two-stage technique for RIT, and explore the new isotopes. There are so many isotopes are being used in brachytherapy also, and there is many new isotopes nowadays are coming up, and all of them have not been tested so far in the clinics. And there is a potential for many new compounds like indium-114 and PD-103 is used, but there are many others which can be used. Okay. Thank you very much.